Now, thank you, George. George, could you please put up the agenda so we can review that before we get started? Thank you.
I have too many screens open. It's going to take me longer than I'd like, but not too long.
We'll be here.
All right, here we go. Found it. Right. All right, if you're not talking, you might want to mute yourself.
Mute ourselves, right?
Is it? I just. Oh, here we go. There it is. Not on. I've never had this happen before, y'all, where I can see it, the document, but I can't see it on the shared screen. So I'm very confused, trying to figure out why that is.
I volunteered to look something up on my own.
Finally.
Never mind.
Yep.
Well, thank you. The one thing we want to avoid, Joan, is people just kind of chit-chatting in the agenda, which was quite frustrating at the voting rights thing. When you and Judy Adams were doing that, I felt that really disrespected Ashley's leadership in trying to facilitate. So what we want to start with is a check-in and your name, your branch, and just 3 words on what kind of day you had. I'm Teresa Elamine with the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, Columbus, Georgia. It was rainy. So now I'll call on Philip.
This is Philip Cole from San Francisco branch, and every day is a good day for me.
Thank you, John. Joan.
I thought maybe you said Joan, but I couldn't hear you very well. Sorry. Yes, Joan Goddard from San Jose, California branch, and in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've had a busy day getting rid of extra email and trying to deal with the stuff that should be dealt with. Thank you.
Samantha, are you here?
I am here. Here in Charlotte in the Southern Piedmont branch.
What kind of day are you having, Samantha?
Very busy. I have been going nonstop.
And George?
George Friday, Southern Piedmont branch, better than yesterday.
Wonderful. Well, George, thank you so much for making the agenda so lively and pretty. So at our last meeting, we agreed to try to do resolutions in our communities in support of reparations. And one of the things that we did last meeting was George shared her research on 2 important resolutions that have taken place. So George is just gonna do those two resolutions, take about 5 minutes to explain the Evanston and the Buncombe County resolutions.
Certainly. As we looked at these last meeting, you may remember I have to stop a share to start another. Let me know if you see a change in your screen. If not, let me know. Do you see something different? Or do you still see the agenda?
Still see the agenda.
Okay.
George, remember I mentioned we didn't need those two links.
Yes, ma'am.
Only the link from the web page at the City of Evanston.
Yes.
Because that's really important to show what the city did in their serious commitment to reparations in Cook County, Evanston, Illinois, in the Chicago area. So if you could show the city's webpage.
So if you go to the City of Evanston webpage and look for the reparations, there is this very detailed process and what they've come up with. Here lets us know the legislative actions to date. I'll try to make that as big as I can and let y'all know that they began researching in 2002. And then in November of 2019, they adopted the beginning resolution that formed a subcommittee and a fund for reparations. That fund had to deal with, came from, as you can see here, I think this is $10 million that comes from the city's municipal cannabis retailers occupation tax. So they devoted $10 million in November 2019 to the reparations fund. And then in June of 2019, they passed the Commitment to End Structural Racism and Achieve Racial Equity Act, which is their policy document. Do you see that now? Anything different, or you're still looking at the city's website? Doesn't matter. I'll go back to it and share with you.
Well, slow down, George. We did see the resolution. It popped up, but the dates seem to be mixed up because you mentioned November, and then you came back to say June of that same year. So let's be clear. They passed the actual resolution in June of 2019. And then in November, they did something else. Is that what happened?
Absolutely, yes. I do have it backwards. They passed the resolution in June and devoted the $10 million in November. That's Evanston.
Thank you.
Yes. And now in my state of North Carolina, in Buncombe County, which is where Asheville is, they passed an ordinance, which hopefully I can get to here. I've got to change, stop and share again. It's so weird. Okay, here we are. So here's the resolution from Asheville, Buncombe County. There's a lot of whereases. I'm going to move them slowly so that and make it bigger so that y'all can read some of them. Basically, a laundry list of all of, not all, but some of the ways that Black people in Asheville and Buncombe counties have experienced the effects of racism and white supremacy and systemic racism. And here we are at the therefore. They want something from the state of North Carolina and the federal government.
George, stop. Where it says directs the city manager to establish a process within the next year to develop short, medium, and long-term recommendations to specifically address the creation of generational wealth and to boost economic mobility and opportunity in the Black community. See, that's what's so important about the resolutions is that they really are substantive in terms of directing the city managers and others to actually put money into it. So George, if you could go to the end so we could see when they adopted their resolution.
July 2020.
So thank you, George. What's really striking about these two resolutions is that one was adopted in the middle of a pandemic, and the other one was adopted several years ago, and we haven't heard much about them, but both of them have been adopted during this decade for people of African descent. And the process that we're engaging as a UN decade/reparations is pointing out how many cities and being a part of the cities that actually adopt these type resolutions. So we're going to take the next few minutes to kind of go around and hear what people think is possible in their city. And I'll start by saying in Columbus, Georgia, Columbus is a consolidated government. So Buncombe County, where Asheville is the county seat, it's important that it is being done county-wide in Buncombe County. And in Columbus, Georgia, Muskogee County, it would be a county-wide resolution because the government is consolidated. We have an election on May 24 for mayor, and there are 4 contested city council seats. And so we could have 4 new people on the city council. So our plan is to start discussing it this year and putting out a draft this year, and then managing to build the support within the council so that we can get to a vote by June, by the middle of June, so that we can celebrate the resolution at the big Juneteenth celebration that will be taking place here in Columbus. So that's the plan for Columbus. Does anyone else have a plan? San Jose, San Francisco, Charlotte, Gastonia. Anyone?
George Stack.
Go ahead, George.
Samantha and I have not come up with a plan, but I do feel that we can start one in Charlotte and then get one in Gastonia. I know in the past we've gotten ordinances passed in Charlotte against racial profiling and using the police to detain immigrant people. So it's possible. And the RAP is a good resource for that. The Reimagining America Project folks, they're very serious. We've got a former mayor on that committee with RAP. And I don't know the older Black man's name, Samantha, from last night, who had on the glasses, who's talking about nullification of elections. He is a serious activist. We've got to get him involved. So that's my opinion, and I think we can do that work. I see Samantha's hand is up too.
So also we have 2 new, we have 1 new really intense report put out by the Mecklenburg County Library on the history of racism in Charlotte, in particular in politics. And a book that just came out by Pamela Grundy, who's a major activist and historian who happens to be white, and put out a great book on the terrible history of racism in this city and state that we can use to build on. There is a mayoral election coming, and it is really important that we're heard, because there are a lot of clowns running, and it's going to be a tough one. So, yeah, we have our work cut out for us.
Well, California has a very serious reparations movement going. So I'd like to think that in the People's Republic of the Bay Area, that we could get something going. So Joan and Philip, since you're both claiming the Bay Area, what do you think is possible?
Do you have something, Philip? I've got one thing, but
Go ahead, Joan, because
okay.
Well, being from the most progressive large city in America, I'm going to have to check into it and see what's on the board already, because I'm sure we're well on our way in that direction. These are professional progressives here, and there's no lack of effort. So I'll just look it up and see what's going on.
Go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, okay. Teresa will remember that I sent the name and email with a paragraph from the African American Community Services Agency. There's a committee that of people who have gotten together, and I know you wrote to Wesley, Teresa, but I don't know whether you got any answer from him. And if not, I can start in on that too, or do something from locally. So I will be finding out about that. I'm not involved yet, but certainly interested and want to find out what's happening so I can encourage other people to get involved if they want more people involved.
What we'll be doing in the South, Joan, and what I urge you and Philip to do, because this is intended to be a WILF project. So there are, I know, at least 25 organizations in the Bay Area that are progressive, that do work nationwide. But the question is, Philip, fundamentally, what is the San Francisco branch willing to do? So all of us were kind of expected to go back to our branches. So it's not like an individual project that Joan would be doing. It would be done in collaboration with San Jose branch. So if there are other active members in the branch, the idea is that there would be a branch discussion about the work, because the branch may decide it doesn't want to do it. And we should hear that report as well. But it really needs to be branch driven. So Southern Piedmont is a branch that will be trying to do Charlotte, Gastonia. We'll be asking the members of the Triad branch to do Greensboro, because that should be an easy walk. And I'm sure we could get it passed in Durham, just to name a few other cities in North Carolina, because as George and I discussed today, Samantha, we were talking about Durham having its own branch separate from the Triangle branch. And so that's something I'll be working on, so that we end up with several more branches in North Carolina, because I think that possibility exists. And here in the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, we're moving in the way I described earlier. So the people who are missing, Sue Hilton, Robin Lloyd, and Alan Haber. Since I did speak with Alan Haber earlier, and because the Jewish Sabbath starts at sundown, and he had a dinner event that he was doing. So we're going to talk about later switching from Friday evenings like this, so to avoid the conflict with the Jewish Sabbath, which Alan observes. But the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti branch of WILF is moving towards a resolution to get it passed by Juneteenth of this year. So Alan is moving pretty fast with it. So George, where are we on time? George, I can't hear you.
It would be great to talk about the tour now.
Oh, okay. Well, we've allotted quite a few minutes for that, but I don't think we'll need much. This is part of and in collaboration with the Black Liberation Caucus 3-year strategy to bring in 50 members by June of this year, and actually 300 members between now and the end of the decade, which is December 31st, 2024, that we would bring in 300 new members in collaboration with all of the branches. And what I've talked to my friends in Philadelphia about is Juneteenth, which is Sunday, the day after the Poor People's Showdown in DC, which will be June 18th. I will take a train to Philly and I will do a Juneteenth event there. But prior to that, meeting with WILF members in the DC, Baltimore area, Marion Ungaro, and another woman who's a WILF member in Baltimore, who's very close to Queen Mother Dolores Blakely, so that we can begin to form the DC Baltimore branch of WILF. So we've been talking about this for some months, but branch building to build the numbers going into the end of June. And then in Philadelphia, working with Tina and others to add women of color, I know in the Philadelphia area, to the Philadelphia branch. And then going from Philly to New York City, where there's a branch in formation, and to make sure that we're there. And I've been working on a branch in Rhode Island, the tiny little state of Rhode Island. So it will be a Rhode Island state branch. And I think there may be 2 or 3 members already there now. Tatiana Reese, Riaz, who lives in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And I have friends that I lived in Providence. So I'm sure we could pull together the branch in Rhode Island on my little tour. And then the final stop will be Boston. And hopefully meeting with folks in the Boston branch to do a community event where I have quite a few friends in Boston that I know would show up for it. And the idea of these events is that it will be a panel discussion where we would bring in other people, like from Temple University in the case of Philly. So I'm organizing the tour now with the expectation that we will be signing up new members to WILF, but also raising money. So it's kind of a collaboration between the Southern Anti-Racism Network and WILF in order to build the tour. So my estimate is that it will be $2,000 for the travel from Columbus, basically, to Durham, and then from Durham by train up north, and then a plane trip back. And that would mean hotel stays, etc. So SARN is committed to raising the money, and the friends along the way would donate. And so we'll be, Samantha, in the spirit of full disclosure, Samantha is a member of the SARN board as of March 16th. and George Friday is staff for the SARN board. So SARN's commitment to Wilf is undeniable, which is why I'm a bit angry about how Ellen Schwartz and Philip Cole and Barbara West treated our application for the work we're doing in Columbus. But I'll speak more on that at the national board meeting. But at any rate, this is a plan for the Juneteenth reparations tour. That's Fannie Lou Hamer branch and Southern Anti-Racism Network committed to it, connecting it with the Poor People's Campaign. So what are your thoughts? Anyone have any thoughts? Do you think it's a good idea, a bad idea, or what?
I think
I
it
could
sounds
say
like
as
a great
well.
idea.
Samantha and then Joan. I saw you both unmute. So Samantha and then Joan, please.
I just said it sounds like a great opportunity to build, sure. You want to spread out and wilt, then we're heavy on the West Coast and light on the East Coast, and let's build up the South and Northeast. I'm all for it. More blue states.
Yeah, it'll be great to go through some of my old stomping grounds. Joan, your comments.
All I said was, wow. I'm glad to have more information because you had mentioned that, that you were going to be doing the trip and so on, but it's great to get more detail. Sounds great. Try to think. I don't know that I have any particular contacts or anything like that to help. You mentioned New York City, and of course, that was a sad death of someone you were probably working with, the woman who died. Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly be thinking about her because she was part of the new members in New York City to build the New York City branch, Jennifer Hyman.
Right.
She was such a sweet young soul. It's so shocking what happened, and I'd like to hear more details about what happened. But there's a GoFundMe for her funeral services, and George is more in touch because she was a Green Party member and a member of the Green Party Black Caucus. And so, I gifted her membership. She was a law student, and so she didn't have much. And so I was happy to gift her membership to Wilf because she was committed to the organization. And that is sad. Thanks for reminding me, Joan.
Yeah, really, very much so. The more
Philip,
we hear about it, the sadder. Yeah, boy, more frustrating.
it was such a sudden thing, but she had been calling me in the last few months, and we were snatching at conversation, but never really had a conversation. And I listened to one of her messages saying, I really want to talk with you. But I hope we can find out more. Philip, as our national board member on the call, do you have any comments about this Northeast tour to build Wilf? Are you with us, Philip?
Yeah, I am driving in and out mountainous terrain. So I keep, cutting out, and I can only just simply follow what's going on here.
Oh, I didn't realize you were in your car. Well, we had allotted 25 minutes for the conversation, but since there are a few of us here, we clearly don't need that much time. So George, could you put up the agenda? Because I can't remember what's on it. George, are you there? Okay. Well, it's kind of annotated on the agenda, which we did send out to visit the discussion at our next meeting in April. But we had set aside a few minutes for a kind of open discussion. And so it's kind of what's your pleasure? I mean, the biggest thing I'm thinking about, as everybody else is, are we already in a third world war or the beginnings of that? And so I would really like to hear from George and Joan about their thinking about this new period of war with the kind of difficulty in negotiating an end to the slaughter because there have been over 3 million people displaced out of country, and there are millions of people who are internally displaced in Ukraine. So this is a humanitarian crisis of the proportions I can remember. And the subject of genocide came up today, and a person from the UN said, well, genocide is more than about just the killing of people. It's about how their whole lives are changed. So it was like Black people have experienced genocide for centuries, which is why charging genocide against the US government for slavery and its aftermath is something that is accepted by the UN, which is why we're in the UN decade at this moment. It's a recognition of genocide against people of African descent. But what is going on in Ukraine is getting close to that. So George, you've been in this movement for way longer than many of us. So what are you thinking? What is UFPJ saying about all this?
Well, it's very likely that I am looking for what may be a positive or not horrible piece of news in this. But in yesterday's UFPJ national meeting, one of the things that was highlighted is that since Tuesday of this week, which is I think the day the Ukrainian president spoke to Congress, there have been quiet negotiations back and forth. This is stuff that Jackie Cabasso has the best international connections of anyone on the committee. She's traveled to Europe and Japan many, many times during her career as a peace action person and a UFPJ person. And she says that they're not publicizing it, but the good step is that they had done like 4 days in a row. Apparently they started a couple weeks ago, and after a few hours, the one side or the other walked away. That had happened several times, but this week they'd gone on the 4th day so far. I think Wednesday was the 4th day they'd started, and no one had walked away yet. And in fact, not only that, but they had gone into breakout rooms on the Zoom to work on parts of what would be a agreement. I don't know if that's the word that they used. So that felt like not horrible. That was Wednesday. Today on Peace Action, there was a lot of discussion about different pieces, a lot on Afghanistan and trying to get economic relief for people so that the finances are okay, because it's horrible right now, and Yemen. So we spent a lot of time there. And then folks talked about when it came to Ukraine, and I got to be honest with y'all, I didn't space out on this, but I don't follow it as well. I don't really truly get the strategy, which is lobbying Congress and the Senate. It's, yes, you want them to know that you're there and you're not to be ignored, but are they going to move anything? So they talked about, and Joan, you might have the language for this as good or better than I, but the Arms Forces Agreement, or not Armed Forces, but War something Act. And I'm losing it.
War Powers, the War
Yes.
Powers Act.
That's it, exactly.
Talking about getting a new war powers.
And that's what most of the conversation was after we finished with Afghanistan, Yemen, and Syria.
Philip for the stack.
So that's it for what I know.
Go ahead, Philip.
Okay, what I wanted to add is a little background on, especially the word of genocide. And the genocide that's actually did transpire once upon a time in Ukraine was a real genocide where over 20 million people perished. And that was in the decade of the 1930s. And I think it's wrong to characterize what's going on now as genocide. Two is that the way World War I started was a buildup of arms, then a buildup of military staff, and then the first tripwire. But we're getting a lot of propaganda about Ukraine and it as a nation. Ukraine has only been a nation for 40 years out of the last 150. And the first time they declared themselves a nation, they were a nation of anarchy. They really were anarchists, and they had a black flag. They were declared anarchists, and they had a black flag to represent their so-called nation. And of course, the Russian government at that time just decided we're not going to have this kind of crazy government on our border, and took over Ukraine once again. But the people of Ukraine have never been a nation as we know modern nations. They've always been a pawn between the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire. And those people have only been pushed around and never actually been represented as a nation. And only post-World War II have they declared themselves a nation. And actually, I take that back. Only since 1991 have they been declared a nation. And previous to that, they were part of the Soviet Union. Previous to that, they were part of Poland. Previous to that, they were part of Lithuania and Poland. And every time someone has attacked Russia, they have gone through Poland to attack Russia. And that is why the Russian government is weary of making any deals which would compromise their security.
Yes, that is a kind of interesting take on it. But as a person who has been a socialist for many years and completely aware of the Russian Revolution, Philip, in 1917, and how the Russian Revolution began to build what we knew as the USSR, and the USSR developed out of the Russian Revolution, and all of those countries that were called Soviets that became a part of the USSR. Ukraine is certainly one of them. And when in 1991, when Russia, the USSR, disbanded and Russia stood alone as a big country, Putin has been stewing about that since 1991, because when the USSR broke up, everyone felt that NATO should have ended, because NATO was put together to fight the communist bloc countries. And when the communist bloc countries were dissolved, NATO continued its expansion. And what Putin is clearly saying, and he does have a point, no way can Ukraine become part of NATO because Ukraine was once part of the USSR. So he, in essence, is trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. He started with Crimea in 2014, and he has been encroaching on the former Soviets. It is a clear strategy. So strategically, his movements are clear. And the only thing that can really resolve it, Philip, is that NATO will claim neutrality and no further expansion in the region.
Well,
And that is the sticking point. All
Yeah.
right.
And let me add this. Not only is that the sticking point, which is definitive, also the Crimea is a major contention point because that's the only warm water port for the Soviet Navy. And there is absolutely no way that the Russian government is going to give up control over the Crimea. As long as they have a one bullet and one gun, they're going to control the Crimea. And that is, I believe, a fact. And of course, I'm not disputing anything he's saying. We're in agreement. And no matter how you twist my words, I understand that we are in agreement that, there needs to be a buffer between the West and the East. And basically, the Ukrainians have always been that buffer. They've always been that pawn between the East and the West, and not ever really a country. And the Warsaw Pact dissipated at the fall of the Soviet Union, and that's why there was really no more need for NATO after the fall of the disbanding of the Warsaw Pact. And that's a point of contention.
The real criticism that I have for Wilf internationally and in the US section, though Wilf put out a very clear statement in 2008 against NATO and the problem of NATO. And I've been in many international Wilf conversations where various countries, including NATO countries, with Wilf sections have said that NATO should not exist. NATO is an obstacle to peace as long as it exists, because when you have a block of countries that say, if you bother one of us, we will all come to that aid, it is a recipe for a world war. And that is the weakness in the peace movement strategically, that we have not challenged the existence of NATO. If NATO did not exist, we would not be here today on Ukraine, and that should not be in dispute. And I'm not twisting your words. Your words are your words, Philip. I have my own words.
And yes, NATO should not exist. And these kind of treaties between countries that come to their mutual defense is what created World War I. It's what created World War II. If NATO continues to exist, they will create World War III. And I don't know where we are. I don't know where you and I differ on our opinion. But if you could point out where we differ on our opinion, I really would like to hear it.
Well, Philip, as important as you think you might be, I'm not in a debate with you. You have your opinion and I have mine. And for you to say that we're somehow in agreement, well, there's some nuances to that. And I really don't agree with your formulations about the history of Ukraine and some other things that you said.
Well, Can you point that out though?
No, because I'm not going to be debating you. So this was an opportunity to have an open discussion. So I'm not into debating you, Philip. So I would like for other people to engage in the conversation if they have anything to say about what they think Will should be doing. Because if not, George, I think we should report on our conversation with Madeline Reese when this topic came up, because she was very clear about the international will position. Joan, you're unmuted. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I would like to ask about the other branches that are not represented here and the reparations question, but it's not what you all are talking about or what you have said this discussion should be about. But I just wanted to say that that is something that I've been wondering about. Thank you.
Well, the other branches aren't here, so you might want to check in with some of the people who were here representing the other branches. I can't remember if you were here last time, but there were quite a few other branches represented. George, I can't remember who they all are, but I know the Robin Lloyd Committee, and I know Sue Hilton said that they hadn't quite looked at it in Humboldt yet. And I can't remember some of the other branches, but and
I think Donna was here from Cape Cod,
yes.
and Alan Haber from Michigan.
Well, I did report on
mentioned
You did, that's right.
George. Alan is with the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti branch, and I spoke with him today, and he gave me the great news about what they're doing, building towards a resolution for Juneteenth of this year. So it would be really great to hear a report in April from San Jose and San Francisco about those branches. And I will check with Metro Atlanta, because I know that would be an easy resolution to pass in Atlanta, because Atlanta is full of reparationists. But this was kind of an open discussion, Joan. And what's on my mind, like most people, is the potential for a widening war in that region, and the fact that so many African countries are in the streets basically saying, we think NATO is a problem, and they abstain in the vote against for Russia to stand down. And so 5 countries voted no and sided with Russia in this struggle. So these are the elements of a potential world war, because China's role is unclear, and they are being very quiet about it. But the US is threatening China, and China doesn't respond well to threats from the US, because every time we look in our clothes, we know every stitch we wear is made in China. China owns us in terms of that. So it's really quite interesting because the economic repercussions of this are already everywhere. I can't ever remember paying over $4 for a gallon of gas in the South. I heard stories of it up north and in California, but we are at $4.28 a gallon in Georgia. And so it's not gonna get better anytime soon. So this is what, and everything is starting to cost more. And because Ukraine produces all that wheat, a loaf of bread is gonna get to be quite costly. So these are the things that will make poor people suffer. So George, you know, you're supposed to help with the timekeeping, George.
Y'all are doing great. Samantha has her hand up, and then y'all are gonna set the date for the next meeting. I'll put the agenda up after Samantha.
Don't say y'all, George, like you're some consultant. You're actually on this committee, I hope.
Okay,
So Samantha.
Hi, so I was just going to say, maybe we could put together some kind of resolution about what happened to non-Ukrainians that we're trying to get out of Ukraine in the bustle and hustle where they were made to stay behind and not allowed on buses and things like that. Where that does not happen, where there's a policy to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, it wouldn't be something for this subcommittee to do, but it would be something for Disarm in Wars, maybe, to take up. And I'm back on that issue committee, and they do have meetings regularly, and they do have a listserv. And so Cheryl Spencer, one of the co-chairs, she's at a conference, and I think she'll be back in a few days. But we should definitely reach out to Ellen Thomas with that question. And she's in the Asheville, Buncombe County area. And I'm determined we're going to have a branch in the Asheville area at some point soon, because we do have people and friends in that area, right, George? Because
absolutely do.
Warren and Kim Porter and other folks. So Asheville is a place where we can build a branch in North Carolina. So there are several dates for meetings. So we're getting away from Friday. So there are several dates proposed for meetings. George, what's going on with the little thing here? So can folks look at their calendars for April 11th? That is also the ending mass incarceration and the death penalty meeting is that date. And we have a special speaker, Patrick O'Neill, who just got out of prison for protesting nuclear weapons. And he wants to talk to us about his experience in the federal prison and his commitment to ending mass incarceration. So maybe we should skip. I think what I meant to say, George, was Wednesday, April 13th. That's the date that I have on my calendar that's totally free. So what about meeting on Wednesday, April 13th? And I would say we could do a 1-hour meeting at 7 p.m. or pretty much any time of day for me. But there aren't a lot of WILF meetings. You know, Thursday seems to be a big WILF meeting day. So the one WILF call is the following day. So if people are okay with meeting April 13th before the one WILF call, that would be great, because I will ask to be on the one WILF call about the tour, about the Juneteenth reparations tour that's going up the Northeast. Okay, folks, I need you to speak because we do have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. So are people okay with April 13th?
Yeah, I can definitely be there at 7.
Okay. Joan is okay. George, are you okay?
Yes, I'm good for all of these dates.
Oh, okay. So April 13th, let's look at the May date we were talking about. What was that? May 11th, which is also a Wednesday. So it looks like we're kind of switching to Wednesdays at 7 p.m. So we could do May 11th at 7 p.m. And then we definitely want to meet before the week of the Poor People's Campaign. So I had on the calendar June 7th, which is a Tuesday, because the 8th, George and Samantha, we have the SARN quarterly board meeting. So we'd like to avoid the 8th, but June 7th, how does your calendar look, Joan? I can't.
I didn't unmute before. Actually, the Wednesdays, the second Wednesdays are a time when the website committee meets, and I do need to go to that, and that's at 4 o'clock, which is the equivalent of 7 o'clock Eastern time. Now those may change and so on, but the June 7th is the first Tuesday, and that's the time when the program committee meets, and those are open meetings for people to attend before, and then sit in on the program committee meeting if people want to, and give some input later on in the meeting. So I don't know whether you want to avoid that or not.
Oh, definitely. Appreciate that. Well, let's just stop with the May, June thing, and we'll come back to that. But do we have a solid confirmation for April 13th? Does that interfere with anything, Joan?
Well, it will probably be a date when very, very few of us, Ellen Thomas, a couple other people meet as the website committee, but that could change. So if it's good for everybody else, that should go ahead, and I can always find out what's happening here and give a written report.
Well, we'll stick with April 13th at 7 p.m. And then when we have more of the other members here, we can pick dates for May and June.
Right.
So it looks like we have our meeting date for next meeting. And thank you, George, for setting everything up. And it's 8 o'clock. So I will say good evening to everyone, and thanks for attending. George, as soon as you can, if you could send the recording out, because Alan Haber really wanted to hear the recording. So if you could send it out to just, I don't know, the list of people who attended last month. It doesn't need to go out to everybody in the world, but just the people that we know who are committed to the UN Decade meeting. We did have a bit of more of a discussion that ended up on the recording. So let's just keep it within the usual suspects, so to speak.
I'll send it to everybody who registered last month.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank
And
you,
everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.